Hello and welcome. You are in the zone, the Biz Info Zone. Hi, my name is Lynn Hawkins. I'm your host, and I am the CEO, Dean, and founder of the P3 Academy of Social Entrepreneurship. And I just want to say welcome to today's show. We've got a fabulous guest, and I'm so excited to be talking about this topic today because this is one of the strategies that helps our savvy social entrepreneurs to really plan not just their purpose or express their purpose, but plan their next moves and implement taking your work into the space of profits and prosperity and making a difference in the world. You know, my whole thing is about do your purposed work. And when you do more, you can earn more. When you earn more, you can do more good in the world. And so that's what we're here to talk about today with my guest, Ellen Finkelstein. And I am so excited because she is a dynamic woman working in the marketplace as entrepreneur. She's CEO of Change the World Marketing. She's adjunct professor at Maharishi University of Management. She's web writing, creating a usable website creator, an e-business project, internet marketing teacher, and she's helping others gain the same success that she's had in her business by improving their own online business and marketing skills. So during this interview, Ellen's going to share her views and practical applications for expressing the love of your work. As social entrepreneurs, one of the reasons that we're so passionate about our businesses is because we love the work that we do. And a lot of times as we are loving the work that we're doing, we have these issues with finding the right strategies in order to help us to move forward and to step into the money flow, the profits, as well as step into the spaces where our target audiences are and where we can make the biggest difference. So thanks for joining me today. We're going to learn some secrets about hosting a successful webinar, some mistakes to avoid, and some tips about doing profitable webinars in a repeatable basis so that you can continue the revenue stream. So thanks for joining us today, and welcome, Ellen. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much, Lynn. Thanks for that great introduction, and I'm so pleased to be here.
Fabulous, fabulous. Well, you know, one of the questions I love to ask all of my guests is, how did you get started on this journey of bringing this important work to the space of entrepreneurs? And today you're talking to a bunch of social entrepreneurs who really believe that doing good makes a difference.
Well, excuse me, I'm getting over a cold, so you might hear some coughing and sneezing. I started out, I'm trying to figure out how far back I want to go, but right after college, I went to become a teacher of the Transcendental Meditation technique, and I kind of thought I was going to be able to save the world and bring peace on earth and everything like that, and it turned out to be a bigger project than anyone expected. But I met my husband in that work, and then I had two young children, and he became a professor at Maharishi University of Management, which is where I have been teaching as adjunct, but he was full-time there. And we came there with two very small children. They were 6 months and 2 years old. And so I needed to find some work that I could do at home to be with the kids. And I started doing some editing, technical editing, and then some writing books. And I first wrote a book about AutoCAD, which is a drafting program, and then I wrote about PowerPoint. But I started my first website as an author platform way back in 1999, when very few people had websites, but authors were just starting to have what they call a platform. And I built it up because I just added more and more content. I had a blog for each of those two topics. And because I started early, though that website became very popular and still gets a lot of traffic, and I built very large lists of subscribers about around those two topics. And as my kids grew up, they're now 27 and 29. I didn't have to stay home for them anymore. And I discovered that doing the same type of work let me travel. So as we were talking before, we can now go to Florida in the winter, for example. And so it's really interesting how when you have a business that's your own business and internet based, you can use it to stay home with your kids, but you can also use it to leave home once the kids are grown up. It can serve both purposes. But I always had this feeling that I wanted to, help the world in some way. And in 2010 or 2011, I started Change the World Marketing. And I started it by, what I did was I taught a class locally where I live in Fairfield, Iowa, on how to start an online business. And I built Change the World Marketing as an example website for them, showed them how to download and install WordPress and install and apply a theme and create pages and blog posts and opt-in forms and the subscriber list and all of that kind of stuff. And I just realized that I love talking about that topic because it's what I actually had been doing, because it was not only because my kids were home and I couldn't travel at the time when they were little, but I also live in a small town. There are less than 10,000 people there. It's a college town, but it's surrounded, like most places in Iowa, by corn and soy fields. So it's not really near anything. It's not like the concept that most people think of city or suburb. And so it's hard to get to places. And so I did most of my work online and just really felt like I could help other people make a living online by doing what I had done. I guess that's the story.
What a great story. I mean, how many people back in 1999 knew that you could start an online business and be as successful as you've been and, take care of family and just do what you've done? That's amazing. So, as it relates to our subject today, I'm just so enamored by the fact that there's so much in the way of strategy that we can use and learn in order to do bigger business, one of which is doing webinars. We've all heard of doing webinars. We've all been in our share of webinars. What makes webinars and doing a webinar such a key strategy for business owners these days?
It's how you reach the world. And just to give you an example, for the last 6 years, I've done a webinar series once a year of 7 or 8 sessions with guests, and I would be the last guest. And the first year we got 1,700 people to sign up. And the second year we got 3,000 people to sign up from 97 countries. So that is an amazing reach that you can have. And when you work online, you can reach people from all over the world. Through my email, I make offers sometimes. And not long ago, I got an email back from someone who was interested in buying an ebook from South Sudan, the newest country in the world. And yesterday it was actually very sad, but it was an email from somebody in Syria, and he's a structural engineer. And I had promoted an ebook. It was about selling. It was kind of commercial, but something good. And to see the contrast of him talking about what he's experiencing in Syria, with the country being totally at war and everything like that. But the point is that you can reach people all over. Speaking is a very powerful way for you to get out your message. It's been that way since ancient times, and it's always been very valuable. But what webinars have done, it's kind of like what the internet did for writing. So now anyone can have a blog and anyone in the world can see your writing, or self-publishing ebooks where you can publish something and anyone can buy it anywhere in the world. What webinars did was make it possible for you to speak to anyone anywhere in the world with an internet connection. And that is amazing. That's just unprecedented. And I feel pretty strongly about the importance of doing webinars over just an audio format and not So that's one thing that there's the video aspect of it, but also that people should see you the way you're seeing me. Even if you're using slides, there should also be a webcam component to make it as much as possible as if your audience is in the same room with you. They can see you and they can see slides. Usually you use slides when you do a webinar. Having all of that together is just a very amazing way, a powerful way to reach out to the whole world. And there's just really not very much that's equivalent to it.
You're right. You are so right. For me, I think it has become almost as key as if you were out live speaking to audiences. And, when you're live, you're in a local market.
Right.
And, you can do major business that way, but you can do so much more. You just broaden your horizons by going into the virtual space. And so what is one of the biggest mistakes that entrepreneurs make when they're trying to use webinars in order to get into this expansive space?
Before I answer that, then I want to follow up on something that you said about the local market. And you can go and speak at a conference where people might be there from all around the country or even from different countries, but it's always limited that way, as you said. So I just wanted to emphasize that when you speak at live, it's always limited to the number of people you can fit in a room. And unless you're somebody who can get an audience, fill up a stadium or something like that, it's very limited. It's also time consuming because of the travel involved. So while I do recommend speaking in person, there's something very special about meeting the people in person, and especially the networking that goes on before and after. I would never recommend only doing in-person speaking. I would always recommend adding webinars to the mix. So I think in order to answer the question about what's the biggest mistake people make, is, and I think I should ask those of you in the audience, what is it that you don't like about webinars? What is your experience when you have a webinar that you don't like? And one of the things that people say, and they say this about live presentations too, is the experience of having the presenter put all the text that they're going to say, or most of it, up on the slide and then reading the slides. And I'm not making this up because there have been surveys, and I have a colleague who does a survey every other year, and he's been done 4 or 5 of them, and every single time, that is the number one thing that people hate. And there are several people don't even necessarily understand why they hate it. But first of all, their reaction is kind of angry. I can read, so don't read it to me, just let me read. But the reason it's so frustrating is that the way our brain works, it's not easy for us to read and listen at the same time. And so when your audience reads that slide, they're not actually listening to you. They're reading ahead of you because they can read faster than you can speak. And because of that mismatch of time, they just read through the slide. So they're not listening to you. And then they end the slide and they go, okay, now let me listen to the presenter. And then they realize the presenter's still back halfway through the slide, reading stuff that they've already read. And so then they tune out a second time. Again, they don't listen to you. They might as well just check their email. It's a very unpleasant experience. The other thing that's not helpful when people do that, when they put the text that they're going to say on the slide, is, and this blows me away when I see internet marketers doing this, because everybody has had the experience of looking at commercials on TV, or we've seen print ads, and we know what they look like. And we know that they make full use of the visual impact, the emotions that visuals can get. If you think about the commercials in the Super Bowl, how emotional, that emotional impact they're trying. There were a lot of them that had to do with little baby animated animals, for example, this time. But they make you feel something, and they do that by the visuals. And there's so much research showing that Number one, people make their decision based on emotion. And number two, people pay more attention to images than they do to text. And number three, images can convey emotion better than text can. And yet, even though all of the professional advertisers and ad agencies know this, I see internet marketers ignoring this basic information and putting up slides that are boring and annoying and not persuasive.
Mm-hmm. Um, it's funny. I will go ahead and confess that when I first started doing presentations in the early days of my trainings, I was that person. Everything that I wanted to say, I had to have on the slide. I knew it, but I didn't want to forget something. And what I realized is that not only are you relying on the slide to be your crutch, you're also doubting yourself. And you're not standing in a space of confidence when you do that. And so if there are any out there who think that that is what they want to do with their slides, listen carefully, because this is a key mistake. And I've had people come up and say, I missed some of the stuff that you were saying. I was like, oh, I wanted you to get this piece and that piece, and all the words on the slide just took it all away.
Yep.
So, and that is something that I think is key that you mentioned as well, that a lot of times people don't even realize why they didn't like a presentation that may have been structured that way. And of course, the person giving it doesn't realize it yet either. So great tip, great tip. Any others like that? I mean, there's got to be more than one big thing.
There are a lot of things that you could do to have a successful webinar. It's a kind of big project. Number one, you want to plan it in advance. Number two, if you're going, and there are different kinds of webinars. So I started doing webinars in 2007, and a company that sold webinars to organizations, corporate America, they hired me to do webinars on PowerPoint, and they would pay me $500 per webinar, and I would do them every other month or something. I did that for a couple of years before I started doing my own. And when you start doing your own, you really have to figure out all of the little pieces, all of the steps. So one of the things is promoting it properly. Another one is to be comfortable with your technology. So you're using Google Hangouts on air, and I use Zoom, and a lot of people use GoToWebinar, which I used for many years as well. So, and there are others. But the point is that you need to be comfortable with that. So you need to practice. You want to make sure you get enough people there. So that's the promotion aspect of it. Now, I mentioned that I used to do webinars that people paid me for. So what else is there? Well, we've already mentioned a webinar summit, many, many speakers. You and I both have a series of webinars where we have guests. There are webinars that you charge for, the training webinars. So I do that too. Every year or two, I do a series of trainings on PowerPoint, and people pay for it. So it's like a course, but it's a live webinar. And then finally, the one that most people are probably most familiar with, that you see most often in the internet marketing space, is free webinars, where at the end there's an offer for a product. And one of the mistakes that people make when they do a kind of presentation like that, a webinar like that, is not enough interaction with the audience, because you need to engage the audience in order to get them to know you, that know, like, and trust factor, but to find out what their questions are, their objections are, so you can engage them and answer them. And so you need to do that. You want to get these little micro commitments, so they say yes, so they're just engaged and they listen to you. And the other thing is that sometimes, so people don't do that, they don't make it engaging, and then sometimes the offer isn't really related to the content that they've given. It's just kind of an add-on. So you want the offer to be the culmination of the knowledge that you've given them, so that it's the next natural step for people to take. So I guess that's a whole bunch of tips.
That's great. And I think that I totally agree as far as, the strategy of having that next step be very relevant to the information that you've been training on, and that it be the next natural step. And I think that there are a lot of novice webinar presenters who don't really get that. But if you're like me and you've studied some of the greats, Ellen Finkelstein and Frank Kern and some of the greats, you've kind of gained that insight. But how do you do that? What's a strategy that one can use to really look at bringing that information in, so that it's not just a bam, there it is in your face, my offer's on the table, take it or leave it kind of thing?
Well, there's a strategy that people use, and it's sometimes called a mile deep or a mile wide, a mile deep or a mile wide. So at Lisa Sasevich used to talk about this, where she would have a topic and she'd say there are 6 pieces to the topic, and then she would go deeply into one of the topics and then say, and the course goes deeply into all the rest of the topics. Or you can give an overview of something. So today, I guess we're giving an overview of webinars. And if we were going to promote a product, it would be something relating to going deeper into the whole process of webinars. And so you either take something very specific and go deep, or give an overview, and then your product will finish that up.
I love that. I love that. And I think that there is one other that is a tactic that I've used that's been successful, that is really a bit of both that you spoke about, and that is what I call seeding the offer.
Mm-hmm.
Where you actually speak about the offer, but then if you've got a one-time webinar, you don't want to start the webinar off with this seed. You want to start it off with the seed thinking, but not the seed planting yet. You want to find the places strategically in the entire webinar where you can begin the seeding, continue the seeding, and the like. And I know that I love how Lisa does it, especially with the different parts to a thing. And you teach on one, and then you're constantly, well, at some point you begin to, and then continue to seed the offer for working with her for the bigger work. And it's a key strategy that I think you talked about practice. Oh my gosh, that's where the practice really comes in and is important. And what are some of the methods of practice that you teach some of your students?
Well, one of the main methods of practice is the same no matter whether you're doing a webinar or a live presentation, and that is just to do it over and over again until you feel comfortable with it. So the earlier you are in your experience with it, the more often you need to do it. Or if it's a new topic, you need to practice it 2 or 3 times. I don't know how many times you've had this happen to you, but I've heard this a lot, where somebody says at the end, oh, I have so much more to cover, I'm going to do this really fast, or I'm going to have to leave stuff out, or I didn't have enough time, or we're going to try to squeeze all of this in. And that happens when people don't practice. So you have no clue how long your talk is going to be until you've practiced it and timed it. And you should tape it. So you should just sit down and do a practice webinar and record it, and then watch it and see how it goes. And you'll get a really good sense of things that you need to change. Maybe you need to speed things up. Maybe you need to slow things down. Maybe you need to do some of that seeding, whatever it is. And also that concept of moving from your free content to your offer will feel much more comfortable when you've practiced it a few times. So absolutely, just practice it, videotape yourself, time it, and it will really help a lot.
I love that. Yes. And as one would practice a live presentation to a group, the same applies to an online presentation. And I like, the point that you brought up is, you're close to the end, you've been watching the time, but then you say, oh my God, where's the time gone? And I'll raise my hand. I have had that experience, which then really lets you know that the practice is so important. So there's another piece of it that I'd like to kind of get your philosophy and strategy on, and that is bringing things to a close. Sometimes people think that, oh, it's just the end of the webinar and I'll just, wrap it up with this 1, 2, 3 thing or whatever. Do you have a particular strategy for the wrap-up piece?
I don't have anything particular for the wrap-up piece, except that it should always be high energy. And you don't want to end just on questions. So you don't want the last question. You don't want to say, well, that's the last. We don't have any time for any more questions, so bye. You don't want to do that. So you need to plan it a little bit, especially if you're selling something. And then in that case, you want to go back to your offer. And you want to summarize the offer and the benefits of it and overcome objections and tell people what they need to do and tell them how excited you are to have been with them. So they just have a great feeling at the end of it.
Great. I think that's key. That's a key point. And I want to let our audience know now that we're talking with Ellen Finkelstein. She's the CEO of it is Change the World Marketing. And she's an adjunct professor at Maharishi University. And she's bringing us these strategies on webinar development and presentation skills so that we as social entrepreneurs can better perfect. There's no such thing as perfection. And I go through this space of, when do you really decide that things are good enough to move on? And we touched on a few things, one key thing being practice, but is there, how do you handle someone who says, I'm the proverbial perfectionist? How can I get over this? What can I do to really know that I'm ready? It's ready. Let's go.
So perfectionism is a problem that lots of people have in lots of situations, not just this one. I have a dear friend who's been writing a cookbook for the last 15 years because she is a perfectionist. And she originally wrote it to make some money. But at this point, 15 years, there's no way she's going to make any money on it that would pay her for the 15 years of work that she did. So you don't want to think of this as being something that's perfect. You want, first of all, when you do a webinar, it's a live event, if you're not pre-recording it, and I do recommend recording it and following up with the people so that people who didn't get there live can watch the recording. But the actual event is a live event. It can't be perfect. It just can't be that way. And you don't want it to sound that way. I don't know if you heard the Republican debate and what happened with Marco Rubio and Chris Christie. And Chris Christie teased him that basically everything he said was these little sound bites that he memorized. And then Rubio replied with another little soundbite. And Chris Christie said, there it goes again. And it was devastating for him. So you don't want to sound like a robot. You don't want to sound like it's all memorized or anything like that. And the first time you do it, you're going to be scared. You're going to be a little nervous. I remember my first webinar, and it was like I can't see the people. Where are they? It was so strange just talking to my computer screen. But you get over that with practice. You just do it and do it and do it. And making a webinar interactive by asking people to respond and to comment and answering their questions or asking them questions really helps to make it a little bit more informal. And that's advice that presentation coaches will give to people who are doing live presentations as well. As people come in, chat with them, ask them where they're from, talk about the weather, whatever it is, make it a little more informal so that it doesn't seem like it has to be, you're not doing, it's not like a piano recital. And you don't want it to be like that. So just get over that and go ahead and do it.
Well, that's great. I love the whole interactive and informal that allays a lot of your own personal nervousness, but it also brings your audience into a more intimate space with you. Now, that brings me to another thought, which is how much time should a webinar be? And how do you determine the kind of webinar that you're going to give, what kind of time to allot?
So traditionally, webinars are an hour. That's very common, the most common time. I have a weekly show that's half an hour because I want people to show up and not feel like they have to put in a whole hour of their time because it's every week. And I've seen people do things for a little bit less than that. Now, I've also seen webinars go on for a couple of hours. And I think there's a general rule of thumb that the more expensive the product you want to sell, the longer you need to have your webinar. So I remember watching Alex Mandossian sell something for well over $1,000, $1,300, something like that. And he went on for a couple of hours. And Daniel Hall will often do also fairly expensive products and will go on for, an hour and a half, an hour and 3/4, because he's trying to keep up that energy and keep up the interaction with the audience, and in order to get more people to buy. And he's trying to find somebody there who's going to buy, who's going to put in a comment that says, "Oh, I just bought it." And he'll say, "Oh, so-and-so just bought it." And, he just keeps on trying to create that feeling of it. So, and in a short time, you can't explain enough about an expensive product to get people to make that commitment right away. So now, one of the things is that will change that to some extent is if you're doing a webinar with somebody else for that person's list. So if I do a webinar for your list, then, which is kind of what I'm doing now, and the people who come on are people that you've invited, so they know you and they trust you, and so they're a little bit more likely to trust me because you've invited me and you're recommending me. So that also helps, but still I would say an hour is your average time.
Very good, very good. And I know that there have been times where, and people have commented when they've believed that there have been plants in the audience.
I'm sure it has happened.
So what is your strategy about having plants in the audience, not having plants in the audience, how plants should act, not act? Give us your take on that.
I'd feel really uncomfortable with it, to tell you the truth. I feel like the message should stand on its own. And if it didn't work, then I was the wrong audience, or I wasn't enthusiastic enough, or it was the wrong offer, and I should just make some changes. So I feel uncomfortable using plants. It's not to say that I've never done anything like that. Like I used to have a virtual assistant, and she would like my posts, like social media posts. She would go and she would like them. And that's kind of like a plant, I suppose. It's not completely on the up and up. But to actually have somebody in a webinar who says like that I bought it when they're not buying it. Ooh, that just does not feel right to me.
What about in the same space? Let's like flip the script and eliminate the plants, but look at a strategy that, especially if it's a program or a product that you've sold that people have used already, what's the value of having testimonials,
Oh, that's
live testimonials?
oh, live testimonials. I've never done that, but you should certainly show testimonials just like you would on a web page. And absolutely, people need to hear that other people have had good experience with it if you've done it before, and there is that type of experience. So I have a program called High Persuasion PowerPoint Presentation Program, and we did some slides for somebody, and he was a financial advisor, and he would do those kind of things, where you get a postcard in the mail and they offer you a free meal, and you go, and then they try to sell you these financial instruments, mostly for baby boomers and people who are just retiring. And so he had done this seminar. It was a live seminar, dozens and dozens of times. And he emailed me back, and I asked him how it went. He said it went really well. And I said, well, I was kind of fishing. I said, well, what does that mean? And he said, well, we got 70% in the last two that I did using your slides. And I said, what do you usually get? And he said 50%. So I went, hey, can I use can I use those numbers, because they're great numbers? And so that is on that sales page. That those numbers that he gave me is on the sales page for that product. And when I sell it in a webinar, it's on a slide. I put that on a slide. So that's absolutely legit and useful for people to know that people have gotten results.
Absolutely. One of my friends has a business in the environmental space, and he, on occasion, will do a webinar, and he's showing the statistics of, what's happening out there and how the work that he does is so beneficial for them, because it's a sales presentation. But what's a strategy that he might be able to use to help increase those conversions?
Well, I'd have to look at the offer. I'd have to look at the slides and see. So I think that one of the things that we haven't mentioned is what happens after the webinar in terms of getting people to watch the recording. So that's one thing that you can do. You invite people to a webinar. Not everybody attends, but they've signed up, so you have their name and email address. And one of the things that you can do is you can get comments from people. It's kind of related to what we were talking about. You can get comments from people on the live webinar saying, well, what did you think about this webinar? What was your number one aha moment? Or tell me what you learned, or something like that. And they put that in the chat. And then you send that out, those comments out in the email the next day saying, you missed a great session. Here's what some people said. And I don't even ask their permission, because I don't use their names, because it's just the time frame is too short for that. But people say, oh, I learned this, that this is going to save me so much time, or this, or whatever it is. And you just have a list of 3 or 4 or more comments in the email the next day, and that will bring more people to watch the recording, which will increase your conversion rate. So that's one thing. The same principle that people use of scarcity and discounts, I call it the DBD principle. It says discount, bonus, and I forget what the last D stands for, but the idea is that you give people a price, but it's discounted. So you discount off your regular price. You also give people bonuses. So you add some value to whatever the product is. And then finally, deadline. So and finally, you give people a deadline. Deadlines are extremely powerful for increasing conversion rate.
I like that. So what's a good strategy for determining a deadline? What's 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours? What's a good deadline philosophy here?
It depends on your market. So if you're selling to businesses, they might have to go back to their boss to get money from the budget, and it could be weeks. If you're selling to individual solopreneurs and they can just, whip out their credit card and buy from you, then you want it much shorter than that. I think that I would never make it less than 24 hours. It just doesn't seem fair to people. So I like to give people a couple of days. And what that does is it gives you the opportunity to send out more emails. So what you do is the next day you send out an email about the recording. And then the day after that or the day after that, when your deadline is, say, just a heads up, this offer ends tonight at midnight.
That's a great philosophy. What about bonuses? I have seen, the short list of bonuses, 3, 4, and then I've seen this like gigantic list. It's like, oh my God, nobody's going to finish the program for the bonuses, or nobody's going to finish the bonuses because there's just too many. How do you choose, kind of thing? So what's your philosophy on structuring your bonuses?
Well, you want the bonuses to make the offer a no-brainer. So you want, especially that last bonus, to go, oh my gosh, that bonus alone would be worth the price of it. And when you can do, it's not so much the number of bonuses, but when the value of the bonus is really so good that it's like another product, then that's a powerful persuader.
So the strategy behind bonuses is that they should be powerful persuaders. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. I'm writing this down for the show notes. And the discount, I get asked so often, how much of a discount should I give? How much should I charge? And I use an easy formula, but there are a lot of variables involved. So, I can hear your answer already. Well, it depends on the cost. It depends on the program or product. But is there some general rule as far as, or general thinking around discounting?
So a huge discount should be only occasional, not in a webinar. I wouldn't recommend spending an hour in a webinar and then cutting the price by 90%, which you sometimes see in like fire sales, something like that, once a year you're closing out a product. I wouldn't do that in a webinar environment. And you should certainly charge enough so that you don't feel like you're charging too little. Just you should feel like there's some integrity, like your product has value, so you're charging enough that people will value it. I remember in 10th grade economics, and this was a long time ago, learning about a perfume that some company put out for $5 or something, and they couldn't sell very many of them. And they increased the price to $30 and sold a lot more. So people have, when there's a certain price to it, people value it. They're also more likely to take advantage of it, to actually implement it. We all know, we've all had that experience of buying something and not using it because it seemed like a throwaway price. And you want people to use it because in the end, that will enhance your reputation more if you can get results for people rather than just trying to sell to people. I guess that's my philosophy on that.
I like it. Good philosophy. And I like the thinking too around the huge discount and potentially reserving that not for your webinar unless there is a good reason that you can bring to not just yourself but the audience as to why you are making such a substantial discount. For instance, I know that I spoke once and practically gave away a valuable opportunity. And I had a reason for it, and I was able to articulate that reason, and more people bought it than I think would have had I not articulated the reason for that type of a discount. So
Right.
I
You have
would
to explain it. I agree. Yeah. Right. Right.
definitely, definitely. Well, so what else might our audience of savvy social entrepreneurs need to know in order to better plan their next webinar to really have it convert and get into the profits that they're seeking, and along with expanding their message out into the world?
So I like to think of it as, you need to think of it as a whole project. Not only do you invite, let's say, affiliate partners, or you would just invite people to attend, and then you give the webinar and you sell the product, and you then do your product thing, how you deliver, however you're delivering your product, and you follow up with it to try to get more people to buy it. But think about the long term, the long range of that. So you can have autoresponders, because these for the people who bought. You've Everybody who registered becomes your subscriber, so you could have a separate set of autoresponders for them, because now you know they're interested in something in particular. So those are long-term things you can do. And finally, you can create an evergreen webinar. So I haven't done a lot of this. There are some programs out there that facilitate that, EverWebinar and Stealth Webinar, I think it's called, something like that. And these are programs that automate the process of putting up a webinar and letting people sign up for it at a specific time. And they sign up for it, and then it plays at that time. And then you can be there and answer people's questions in the chat if you want to, or you can look afterwards and answer people's questions afterwards. But it can become a kind of selling machine if you have a good webinar and you have a way of bringing people into it, which you can do in many ways, with affiliates, with Facebook ads, with any way that you might bring in traffic. And so you can create this long-term success out of this product by automating it. And you usually start that process with a live webinar. You tweak it a few times until it converts as well as you'd like to, and then you would think of automating it.
Beautiful. So I always ask my guests a question for them to answer regarding social entrepreneurship. And I thought I would ask you, tell us a little bit, especially with the work that you do, what is the value of calling yourself, being in the space of thinking as a social enterprise owner?
Well, it just makes me feel comfortable. That's a really lame answer. But I knew that when I started this coaching and this training that I'm doing in Change the World Marketing, that I wanted to work with people who had, to some extent, they wanted to change the world. They wanted to make the world a better place. I knew those were the types of people that I wanted to work with. They turned out to be slightly more female than male, not exclusively, but that seemed to be a tendency. And those are the people that I feel comfortable working with, that I really want to help, because I feel that by helping them, I'm multiplying myself. In other words, if I can help them and they can help others, that you can see it just goes on forever and ever. So I just really love that ability to be able to help people who are helping others.
I do as well. And I think that's a great alignment with the philosophy of social enterprise and social entrepreneurship. Because, one of the things that I know a lot of solo entrepreneurs have come out of the corporate environment, and, once in the corporate environment, having had this identity of I'm a, marketing expert, or I'm a, financial expert or whatever, but to really consider themselves and hold in the space of the work that they do. I am also a social enterprise, a socialpreneur, and doing my work with a bigger premise and a bigger promise in mind, being, there's somebody more than the work that I'm doing that's going to benefit from the work that I'm doing. And I really like the thinking of the work that we're doing and how we're impacting others so that they can impact others in a positive way. That's really in the space of changing the world. And so tell us a little bit about how people can get in touch with you, Ellen. And I know you've brought something that's a beautiful gift for our audience members. Tell us a little bit about that as well.
I have a free offer, and I try to make it's one of those covering a lot of area. And so first of all, it's like a guide, I would call it, called 13 Steps to Create a Successful Online Business. But then I go in more detail. I have 4 videos that go on top of that or with that. And one of them is called Profit with Webinars. And it has some very specific information about how to structure your webinar so that it's most successful. And I think people will find that valuable. There's some other things as well. There's something about creating an ebook and something about working on your website and something about growing your list. So 4 short to medium length webinars that go along with that. And I think you have the link for it.
I do. And it's a bit.ly link, bit.ly / biz_change the world marketing. So let me give that to you once again. It's bit.ly / biz_change the world marketing. And I believe that you can use all lowercase letters. But if not, it's capital BIZ. Let me just check real quick. Change the world. Okay, you have to use capital BIZ for the Biz Info Zone. Capital B, capital I, capital Z, _ capital C, change, capital T, the, capital W, world, capital M, marketing. So it's BIZ _ change the world marketing. And it will be in the, on the event page. I'll make sure that the link is up, and it will be on the YouTube page. So you'll be able to find it. I may even get creative and annotate it in the video. How's that?
Sounds wonderful.
Yes. So thank you. What an amazing gift. And I highly recommend too that you check Ellen out, not just because of this gift, but she does a show called, she mentioned it, a 30-minute show called Star Power Half Hour.
And you were a guest a couple of weeks ago.
I was. It was an amazing opportunity. I actually talked about a 10x business strategy around money, one of my favorite topics. And I highly recommend that you take a look at that as well. The experts that Ellen brings on the show are just as amazing as those who come into the zone. Which one of the reasons Ellen's here, she's one of those amazing experts. And our goal is the same, to do what we do and help to impact the world by bringing you the people who can give you the strategies and the tools and the tips and the techniques in order to do what you do more easily, to build your team and effectively communicate, be the leader who you are commissioned and responsible for being as the CEO of your organization. And if you're not the CEO, you are the CEO of you, that you are your brand. And when you're looking at how can I do things bigger and better, even for the professional organizations that I work for or belong to, these people, these strategies, these opportunities are perfect in that space as well. So with that, and our closing out today's show, I want to say thank you to our sponsor, the P3 Academy of Social Entrepreneurship, where we teach entrepreneurs how to be in the space of social entrepreneurship and exponentially grow your business using the 12 practices of accelerated business development. So take a look at more of what the P3 Academy may be able to do for you at p3academy.com. Look for more information about the show. Check out the bizinfozone.com, and our guest, find her at
Thank you.
bit.ly BIZ, capital BIZ _ change the world marketing, with those capital letters in there. And maybe I'll do another one with lowercase letters just to make sure that I get everybody. But thank you for being here with me today, Ellen. It's been such a pleasure talking in this space of webinars and the value and the strategy behind them. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Go out and do webinars, everybody.
Absolutely. So I'm your host, Lynn Hawkins, CEO, Dean, and founder of the P3 Academy of Social Entrepreneurship, saying to you, remember, keep an open heart, be the open heart, because open hearts, open hearts. And join us back here again next week, right here in the zone, the Biz Info Zone. We'll see you next week. Bye, everyone. Make it a great day. Make it a great week. Bye.